I've entered into the service of a new gentleman. It would seem he is a gambling man. Okay. Sure. Monsieur Phileas Fogg returned home early from the Reform Club, and in a new-fangled steam carriage besides. I helped him down, and the iron-lunged, steam-driven horses clattered away. Passepartout, said he, we are going around the world. Around the world, monsieur? I asked, utterly astonished. We shall circumnavigate the globe within 80 days. He was quite calm as he proposed this wild scheme. We leave for Paris on the 8:25 in an hour. This was a shocking turnabout for my master, who was, by all accounts, a creature of inflexible habit and mechanical irregularity. Perhaps the carriage's engine fumes had affected his reason. Hmm. Perhaps you should lie down, monsieur? That would be a most inefficient use of time, he replied implacably. Pack an altimeter and my evening jacket. There is not a moment to waste. You, Passepartout, now have funds. I guess. Quickly, collect your things and we will be off. I guess I click pack. Fogg's apartment. There was just a moment to seize anything further than that I thought might be useful for a long trip. You did want that thing. And his evening jacket. I don't think that'll fit. Or that. So, I guess that's what we got. Our completed Englishman's wardrobe should help us negotiate times of upper class journeys. I guess time to depart. The guard's van has space for one suitcase for supplies. This seems a bearable route to go. The mechanical horses raced past Piccadilly Circus and Pall Mall faster than a team of thoroughbreds. Even so, the whistle of the 8:25 was blowing as we pulled up to Charing Cross Station. We have no tickets, I exclaimed in horror. That does not signify, Monsieur Fogg remarked over his shoulder as he hurried toward the platform. We must not miss this train. I rushed after him, and we leapt aboard. Just another train whistle pierced the air. A guard raised his thick brows at us as we settled into a nearby compartment. He held out a hand. Tickets, please. I pretended to have lost them, patting down one pocket, then the other. I was about to start digging through our suitcase when Monsieur Fogg interrupted my touching performance. My valet is trying to express that we were in too much haste to purchase tickets, he said. Which was not at all my meaning, and he left rather in doubt of my master's interpretive abilities. He was not a particularly theatrical man, it must be said. You may purchase them from me, the guard was saying, though it's more expensive, I'm afraid. £85, please. I handed over the £85 and smiled a thin smile from one working man to another. The guard gave me our tickets and slid the compartment door shut behind him with a pneumatic hiss. Your funds have gone down somewhat. Your relationship with Fogg has grown slightly worse. Your character is now polished. Oh no. I'm at your service, Monsieur Fogg. Ah, the bumbling has burnt out. But tell me, Monsieur, what is the purpose of our journey? I have made a hefty wager, and I do not intend to lose. London smog gave way to rolling hills and the pastures of the Kentish countryside, still untouched by the hand of technological advancement. Monsieur Fogg read his paper whilst I repacked our bags, thrown together in haste and confusion. As afternoon turned inexorably to evening, I discovered that my master was one of those gentlemen who broke their silence rarely, if at all. A guard rapped on our door a few miles before Dover. "We're about to submerge," he warned. "Takes some people a bit funny, so watch out." "What do you mean, submerge?" I cried. "This is the London to Paris Amphitrite Express," he explained, as though to a particularly dim-witted child. "The submersible train. Talk of all the London papers?" "I must have missed it," I admitted humbly. "Missed it?" he said scornfully. "Every inch of her has been examined and stamped with the artificer's seal. This is the world's only bathyscaphe locomotive." I could not help a shiver as the fins above the Amphitrite's wheels extended with a hydraulic hiss. Night fell, and we plunged past the end of the track into the freezing water of the English Channel. Relations with Fogg have improved slightly. Well, that's good. I'm glad. The Amphitrite plowed through the water overnight and splashed up onto the wider gauge French tracks at Calais at dawn broke. "Do you have a route in mind, Monsieur?" I asked, as the water of the channel dried from the compartment windows. "I am as yet undecided," my master admitted. "The new canal has sped up the shipping route from Suez to Bombay, though perhaps we could take the Trans-Siberian Railway across Russia." "Surely not Bombay," I exclaimed. "We shall surely wilt in the scorching heat." "Then we would do well to buy hats and linen trousers," he replied. "There are other alternatives. We may also travel overland and across the Black and Caspian Seas." "But which is the safest?" Monsieur Fogg raised an eyebrow. "There is no place in the world which is not safe for an Englishman," he said coolly and with great finality. Parbleu, I scarcely knew what to think. We arrived at Paris Gare du Nord just after 1 o'clock. Automaton porters lifted our luggage and then our persons onto the platform with long, delicately filigreed iron arms. Paris, city of my heart. I was home, but not to stay. Am I going to have to choose a route? Am I going to be able to do this? Yay, Paris. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Market maybe? I don't really think we need money at the moment. Bank. We must visit the bank, Monsieur Fogg declared. You have additional funds? I am a gentleman. They would extend me credit if required, he replied. But do you suppose I put my entire fortune into a carpet bag under your supervision? I did not answer. I regarded the bank as we entered. It was a palace of stone and shimmering marble floors with beautiful windows, fountains, and plants. You wish to withdraw funds, we were told. I warn you, it may take some time. I don't know. I suppose we'll go with the longest one for now. We require 5,000 pounds, I said. The manager drew a sharp breath. I'll have to communicate with London first, of course, he apologized. I should have a reply in 5 working days. It seems, Monsieur Fogg remarked as we left, we have some time to dispose of. Return to the bank on Wednesday to collect your funds. Explore. We had a few hours to spare. I asked Monsieur Fogg if I might enjoy my city before we had to leave. Indeed, and you learn anything of note, be sure to relay it. I nodded and headed into town. The talk on the streets was of one thing only, an enormous, elegant oval stadium constructed upon the green fields of Champ de Mars and containing the technological marvels, art, amusement parks, and milling crowds of the World's Fair of 1872. My city still wore the scars of last year's siege. I ventured inside the grand illuminated pavilions of the exposition. I went west towards the airship hangar, past a booth with a husband and wife pair selling panoramic hot air balloon rides to eager tourists. I inquired as to their hourly rate, wondered if perhaps the balloon could be encouraged to go a little way east as well and contribute to our great journey. 80 pounds for a half-hour flight, the man responded. Okay. That is robbery, the man shrugged. We are the only balloonists here today. Are you willing to miss out on the experience of a flight over Paris? I am going around the world, I replied. I hope for much more impressive sights in the days to come. The man nodded and moved on to the next punter with great swiftness. I regarded the airship that filled the hangar behind him. There were a huge number on display from all over the world, and my eye was immediately caught by the gilded Egyptian Ifrit class airship painted all over with stylish poppies and feathers. It resembled nothing more than a vast flying sarcophagus. I love it already. Do people really fly in such things? I asked an exhibitor. Indeed, hundreds of them do it every day, he replied with a booming laugh. They say the skies of Arabia are crisscrossed with the trails of the Egyptian ships. Perhaps one day soon Monsieur Fogg and I would find ourselves flying in such a craft. I returned to the exposition center, my thoughts turning with clouds and engine rotors. Avenues sprawled in every direction between the inviting illuminated pavilions of the exposition. I decided to take my leave, and I returned to Monsieur Fogg, who was eating a meal of plain boiled beef a l'anglaise. Did you enjoy the exposition? My master inquired diffidently, as though I'd been out visiting. And I nodded. Will we travel by airship, do you suppose? I asked. I think it highly likely, he replied. They are expensive, but extremely fast. I dreamed that night of mechanical wonders and automatons with beautifully enameled faces, knowing little of the strange inventions and stranger people I would soon encounter my journey around the world. Oh. Your relations with Fogg have grown slightly worse. Your character is now suave. I don't know what that means. I don't know if we got time for a day. So you want to go ahead and plan, maybe? Okay. Am I supposed to, like, figure out a route? Someone does seem to get me there. Okay, so I'm probably gonna have to sleep then. We'll pass the night here, okay. We took a hotel for the night. We'll be comfortable here, Monsieur Fogg remarked, but traveling overnight will often be more efficient. So we must board one of the trains available where possible. Perhaps, he replied, the short answer indicating, I think the one-day journeys might often be more flexible in their timing and could allow for more connections. Still, the surrounds of the Hotel Ritz were most enjoyable. I don't know if I'm doing this right. We're down day 3, okay. I don't want to go this way. Tomorrow. We'll do it again. We had another 5 days to wait for our transfer of funds, but we were still unsure whether we should wait. With what remained of the day, I ran a few errands for the hotelier, earning £114 in fees and tips. Nice. Maybe I'll just try it without having to go to the bank unless I absolutely got it. I mean, I know that I'd started a fund transfer, but I don't know how this game works. I'm still figuring it out. Let's go. The overhead rack has space for one suitcase. Go. Boarding the Orient Express was an altogether calmer affair than our race through London had been. Mechanical porters loaded us in through the windows and then snapped them shut with a delicate click. The train would be the first leg of a much longer journey, however, so there was little use in growing too comfortable. Indeed, it could only take us as far as Vienna. A last long whistle blew, and we began our journey east. What does that do? Balloonist kidnappers exposed at World Fair. What? My master wished to be undisturbed, so as we left Paris, I left him and went to explore the train. There was a delightful dining car and an observation deck formed by the replacement of an entire compartment with an open glass cube. I stopped there watching the scenery flash past, and as I stood, a portly gentleman with a quivering, luxuriant mustache struggled by carrying several trunks. I offered him my aid, and he introduced himself after a shower of thanks. Henry de Blowitz, foreign correspondent of the Times. I introduced myself in return. My name is Passepartout. I can't say his name. And my master and I are going around the world. Well, then I wish you luck, he replied. He patted his breast pocket. The stories that you hear, it seems, everywhere is on the brink of one revolution or another. Everywhere there is progress, but who will count the cost? That sounds most ominous, I told him. Does it? He replied with a beaming smile. Well, I am a journalist. It's my duty to make omens. Good day to you. With that, he clapped me on the shoulder and headed off in the direction of the dining car. I followed him and found a few groups of people. Talking quietly, I joined a pair of young Parisian ladies who were toasting their adventure away from France. They were going to Vienna to hear a concert by the great steam orchestra there. I only hope we'll be allowed to leave, one confided. Because of your great beauty, I inquired, and the girl blushed. Her companion frowned at me. You are a valet, monsieur, she pointed out. You do not have the standing required for such a remark. I am first and foremost a Frenchman, I rejoined with a smile. The girl shook her head. And above that, a man, she replied with a sigh. Come, Isobel. She stood and her friend reluctantly, I think, left with her. I finished my cognac and then I returned to Monsieur Fogg, who, to my surprise, looked up from his paper at me. What did you learn? He inquired. I told him of the observation car, but he showed no interest in its design or function. He was, however, interested in de Blowitz. Could he tell you much of the journey ahead? He asked. Every detail may be important to us. I nodded, though I thought he overstated the case. Either way, there was no more to be done that night. We arrived in Munich a few hours later. The Franco-Prussian War had concluded but a year previously. Yeah, be proud of it. Thus, I flaunted my French accent here in the Victor city. Had no interest in coddling other sensibilities. That is, until the concierge in our hotel quite deliberately dropped a mug of coffee into my lap. Quite a sensitive moment for poor Passepartout. I took the hand. Sure, why not? I made sure to spill a glass of Merlot on his shirt in return. The man stiffened but did not criticize my clumsiness, returning a moment later in fresh whites and carrying a new glass, which somehow he contrived to splash into my face. I want to stab him. In mopping myself, I accidentally pushed my steak knife into the man's arm, drawing only a minor amount of blood. A moment later, he had turned about and brought a carafe of water into sharp contact with my left temple. Nah, we're gonna hit him. There was nothing for it. I hit him in the eye. The man fell over, and Monsieur Fogg rose to his feet with deliberation. I shall retire early, he announced, and returned on his heel, having left behind his roast lamb. The fallen concierge also retired, and I was left to contemplate my position amongst the gentries of once genteel dinner. Oh. Relations with Fogg have grown somewhat worse. Your character is now polished. I have no idea what any of this means. I think I need to go up to Berlin. There was little daylight in Munich. The sky was shrouded in steam and oil fumes from the tractors and hydraulic excavators in the streets. A place of industry, then, whose citizens wore dark cloaks to protect their finery from the soot. I brushed a few specks of dirt from my collar, absent-mindedly, far more intrigued by the gleaming machines remaking the city's skyline. Rumor had it that this work was doing of the Bavarian king, who had become obsessed with steam power. Man, that sounds so toxic. And was spending an exorbitant sum of imported machinery and engineering works. The Kingdom of Bavaria had recently joined the German Empire. It appeared that the king suddenly had much more time on his aristocratic hands. Power and free time are a most potent and dangerous combination, as our journey, I fear, proves. I don't know what I'm supposed to be, so I guess I'll wait. We had 3 days to wait for our money to arrive from London. But we were still deciding what to do. As night fell, run some errands. I ran a few errands for the hotelier, earning £97 in fees and tips. Yeah, my funds. I just keep doing that, maybe. I don't know how the wardrobe's going to be of assistance, but we'll find out, I guess. We crossed from Munich to Berlin in a patched-up steam carriage. The smoke pumped out of the back through a tall iron chimney, leaving a soot-smudged wake which trailed behind us like a flag. Christoph. Our driver, Christoph, could not stop talking of his father, who was an engine driver and had just been promoted. The Kaiser has merged all the state railways into the Reich Railway, he told us proudly. We have the most efficient system in all of Europe. I glanced at Monsieur Fogg, who brightened appreciably at Christoph's words. He was not usually one to appreciate the achievements of foreigners, but no doubt efficient railways were an exception to his rule.
So, what do you think we should go ahead?
Greetings, Christoph. Don't worry, you won't distract me from the road. I need to know about Berlin. The beer and sausages are good. I don't know. Is it possible to go from Berlin to Warsaw? Absolutely. My father had quite an adventure aboard the North German Express from Berlin to Warsaw. Is it possible from Warsaw to Budapest? I believe so. One can travel in a public carriage from Warsaw to Budapest. An apple, Christoph? We were on the outskirts of Berlin when a shadow fell over the steam carriage. Christoph glanced and crossed himself, taking his hands from the wheel. I looked up, not knowing what to expect, but the sight that greeted me almost defied description. An Ottoman Guyot-class airship hung directly above the steam carriage, low enough that I could see a black pirate flag waving proudly from the stern of the gondola, and the name Canavar picked out in gilt letters on the prow. We were under attack! 2 mechanical claws were dropped off the side of the gondola. Their pincers gleamed threateningly. Drive, Christoph! I shouted urgently, and Christoph opened the steam valve as far as it would go. Our lightly loaded car leapt forward, outrunning and swerving out of the reach of the clawed arm. We did not slow until reaching the cover of trees, when Christoph braked hard and exhaled deeply. What was that? I demanded. He shuddered. Pirates. The dread Captain Kasim, if I'm not mistaken. I wondered if Monsieur Fogg regretted the loss of an airship, even one sailed by the worst sort of rogues, but it was gone from the skies. We steadied our nerves and then proceeded at a calmer pace into Berlin, grateful for the city once it swallowed us up. Okay, so I need to pay attention to what comes after the places I choose. Minsk and Moscow. I guess I'll sell those. Guess I want to buy those as well, because it opens up all this. Okay. I'm gonna have to sleep, I think. We stayed for the night in the Hotel Adlon on Unter den Linden, the main boulevard in the central Mid district. From the window, the Brandenburg Gate was lit by upturned gas lamps. I went for a late-night stroll along the avenue, past groups of people drinking at low tables. I sat down beside a pair of ladies who were each trying to outdrink the other. I kept score for them as jug by jug they slid slowly underneath the outdoor table and onto the cobblestones beneath. The evening was riotous, and I learned from my new friends Adele and Claudia that you could pick up Viking drinking horns in Stockholm that will sell for a fortune in Alexandria. So, minks in Moscow. Okay. How do I get more of those, I wonder? Is it in settings? No? Okay, so now I figured that out. North German Express to Warsaw. The luggage rack has space for 10 suitcases. Be a bearable move, okay? The newly amalgamated German Reichsrailways made a political point of their efficiency to quiet any nationalist rumblings. The departures left at the moment they claimed, not a second before and not a second after. Suspecting as much, I attempted to plan ahead, loading all the luggage a full hour early and ensuring Monsieur Fogg was installed the moment the guards lifted the gate. However, in my preparations, I somehow left my own ticket behind. And was forced to buy a forgery from an old woman with only one tooth, which she used to cut the punch holes into a blank ticket. I was highly suspicious of the racketeer and waited for a moment to try the ticket when the guards were not looking. Unfortunately, I waited too long. As the train pulled away, I cursed. The guards came to investigate, found my spittle-stained ticket, and dragged me away. I spent the night in the station's private cell while my gracious captors sent a wire to Warsaw for Monsieur Fogg to consider bailing me out upon his arrival. My hopes of his acknowledging me were not high. Greetings, Monsieur le Prisoner. So they have locked you up as well, I see. What can you tell me of Warsaw? Yes, minks can be reached from Warsaw aboard the Belarus Express. Now tell me, I'm in here for picking pockets. You ever picked a pocket? Once, perhaps, in a time of need. Apparently Minsk is connected to Moscow, is that right? You mentioned trains. I've been told one could travel aboard the Nile Express from Cairo to Luxor. I've gathered the Trans-Siberian Express runs from the Moscow across Russia. I hear the commercial port has been relocated. It is now a military town. Is it possible to go to Beijing? Indeed, you can get to Beijing from aboard the... But the fare is high. There's some words I can't say. Is it possible to travel from Beijing to Pangsau Pass? Did you realize that there is neither hotel, bank, nor market in Pangsau Pass? I spent the day imprisoned, pacing backs and forwards. I had nothing to do but chew my fingernails to the quick and curse myself roundly. Was this the end of my adventure around the world? Surely not. But then the keys rattled in the iron door, and one of the guards informed me that Monsieur Fogg had vouched for me. A gentleman's word needs no further proof, and so they hauled me from the cell and put me on the next train. I have never been so grateful to be aboard a locomotive. I was away. The countryside rolled past. And I spent the journey relaxing. A few hours without a master to tend? What luxury! Monsieur Fogg met me on the platform as I stepped from the train. Apology on my lips, but he interrupted me. Come along, he said, and turned on his heel. I hurried after him into the town. We're going to Moscow next, right? Moscow. We walked the streets of Warsaw, feeling the air of a different continent all around. In less than 2 generations, the Tsars had made this little outpost all their own. But there were signs of dissent on every corner, for on every building project in the city there were glued pamphlets declaring the Russians to be dogs, fiends, and Philistines. We walked further, however, and saw no disturbances. It seems all the revolutionary types have been placated by prosperity. In fact, our hostelier told us later that the pamphlets themselves are produced by machines buried by the rebels during the troubles. No one has yet found them to switch them off. We clambered aboard the train. Monsieur Fogg settled in a far corner like a dusty old uncle, and I went to sit next to him, ready to attend to his wishes. He had none, of course, but to be left alone with his thoughts, whatever they were, so we rode in silence. Berlin Railwayman locks up incognito dignitaries. We arrived at Minsk after nightfall and disembarked. A very cold newspaperman offered me a sip of Turkish coffee at a tram stop in Minsk. My grandfather was French, he said blandly. Then we are compatriots, I toasted him with my ceramic tumbler. I do not think so, he spat onto the ground vehemently. I did not know him. He was one of Napoleon's soldiers. Minsk was occupied by the Grand Armée during the invasion. He did not speak in a particularly accusative tone, but any words I tried to say in reply coagulated at the back of my throat. Ah, I managed to choke out. I changed the subject. Do you know what a writer named de Blowitz? I asked. The man's expression seemed to lift a little. The fellow from the Times, he replied. I read his work, of course. You know him? I met him on the Orient Express. The newspaperman laughed bitterly. What journalist can afford to travel on the Orient Express? You don't know where he was going. I don't remember, actually. I have no idea, I replied. The man shrugged. You are traveling? We head from here to Moscow, I think, he nodded. Look out for the police. They are giving themselves more powers every day. Our tram wheezed into the stop, and the conductor opened the doors. The newspaperman boarded. Enjoy your coffee, he added, without looking in my direction. I boarded with him, and he cracked a rare smile. If I were traveling, I know where I would choose to go. And where is that? Tehran, he replied, to my surprise. An unusual choice. He laughed bitterly and tapped the newspaper under his arm. When I was younger, I knew a woman called Lena Palkala, a Finnish girl. She became a dancer. Now she passes herself off as Slavic and has just been signed up to dance exclusively in Tehran. I am sure I will never see her again, but if I could, I would try. Then go. I can advise you on routes. I would never find her. Lena Palkala is gone. Her name is now Marina Poltavka. I think I said that right, but I don't know. I don't know how to say half these things. I took a few hours to explore, investigating the various options for how we might continue our journey. Monsieur Fogg looked quite resolved. We must once again make a demand upon the bank, I fear. The bank, as we entered it, was a small affair, but efficiently looked after, and we were quickly seen to. You want to make a withdrawal? The manager asked. You may have to wait a day or two. We require £700, I declared. The manager nodded. I'll need to talk to the London branch to confirm you understand. She explained the funds will be ready tomorrow. My master shook hands on it and we left the bank. Okay. No, so far we've only done 11 days. Before retiring, I made certain to repack and iron everything to better ready us for our upcoming departure. Relations with Fogg have improved slightly. Good. Oh, I can skip ahead time by clicking that. We returned to the bank at opening time to collect our funds, and then we were ready to proceed once more. We took a room and settled in, and I made certain to repack and iron everything to be better ready as for inevitable departure. I just really don't want this guy mad at me. The train pulled out from the Mink station well after nightfall. Monsieur Fogg had taken to tapping his watch every time we began a new journey, as though he was recording the time of departure through some fantastical spring-operated signal. Most likely a nervous habit. A man of Monsieur Fogg's composure and steady complexion must surely hide some vagaries in his mental closet. Little time to do anything before total darkness enveloped the train. Greetings, Monsieur Croissants. Told you can reach Ekaterinburg from Moscow. My mother had a wonderful time aboard the freight train. I'm told that it connects to Omsk. All I know is this. I hear the governor of Omsk is quite an important man. Can you travel from Omsk to Kabul? I believe so. You can get to Kabul from Omsk aboard the mail airship. Oh. From Kabul to Lahore? Yes, one can travel by palanquin along the Grand Trunk Road from Kabul to Lahore. Morning came, and we were still crossing the Russian countryside, the train moving on its slow and steady way. I spent the time talking to other passengers, hoping to find options for our next leg. I met a charming Muscovite artist and had a pleasant, if unproductive, conversation that whiled the hours away. Finally, we pulled into the stone edifice that was Moscow Station and disembarked. I don't think Fog likes me very much. I think I need to go up a little bit. Sure, why not? So far, we've been traveling by train anyway. Moscow was not a comfortable city for a Frenchman. A local composer had just written a piece of people were calling the 1812 Overture, commemorating the Russian victory over Napoleon's invading Grande Armée that fateful year. Patriotic persons were at fever pitch. But I did not let that stop me from exploring the city, though I resolved to remain mute and unobjectable should I encounter anyone. I traversed the city on foot, keeping out of sight of the patrols of uniformed policemen and Cossack troops mounted on black mechanical steeds. I ventured away from the wide boulevards of the eclectic architecture of Verskaya Street towards... I don't know what the Kremlin is. So the outdoor markets of Staraya Square. They were full of apple-cheeked young boys and wrapped-up peasant women. I found myself drawn to one particular stall, which seemed plain on the surface, but had a variety of special merchandise for a discerning customer, including a magnificent bottle of Chateau something 1860. I purchased it for £50, expensive but sure to be worth the price for such a rich Bordeaux. As the bells of the nearby church chimed in the hour, I returned to our hotel, content with my brief view of the Tsar's capital city. spent a few hours in exploration, learning ways in which we might travel onwards. I didn't get up there. Where am I going to go? I think I'll continue the path I've chosen. 2 days. I mean, this one leaves tomorrow, but I can wait an extra day, right? With the last light of the evening, I did some minor alterations to our clothing to ensure that everything was ship-shape for an inevitable departure. One more day. As night fell, I washed and hung our linen to better ready us for our upcoming departure. Your character is now swap. Again, no idea what that means. The bell in the stuccoed and whitewashed Moscow station gave its third and final clang, and the platform erupted into frenzy. We boarded calmly and found ourselves in a small cabin with heated water and even a shaving mirror. Phileas Fogg attempts round the world adventure. We were away. I familiarized myself with the train's layout. The last 2 carriages were heavily guarded prison cars, then 4th class, then 3rd, and so on, the amenities scattered between passenger cars. The candlelit chapel was presided over by a long-bearded Orthodox priest and full of the pious, and was positioned near the crew's quarters. I spent an hour listening to their murmured chanting and felt quite reassured. My bed that night swayed along with the motion of the train, and we had several more days of this journey through the middle of nowhere at all. I wonder if Courage the Cowardly Dog is there. Our fellow passengers were a mix of convicts, political radicals, prospectors, businessmen, and military officers. In the midst of this was a young boy, Rosa, wearing a bored expression, as she was harangued by her formidable maman. I made her acquaintance only too easily. She was desperate for a sympathetic ear, and told me her great secret. She had fallen in love with a peasant boy in 4th class called Zhek, by which I understood that they had shared a glance of extreme passion in the baggage car. Ah, to be so young again. I resolved to keep an eye on their burgeoning locomotive romance. We crossed the Volga in the early afternoon, crawling slowly over a bridge perched on the high stone pillars. The devout Russians stood and crossed themselves while looking out over the water. I could just hear the lilting, rhythmic oar-boating songs of the Volga boatmen over the whistle of the steamboats. The train crawled up into the Urals and stopped at the town of Ekaterinburg. I bid farewell to young Rosa as she was slipping away to see her Zhek once more. I wish you happiness, I told her, I have never been so happy, she replied enthusiastically. I shook my head and left her. She waved to me from the window as the train blew its whistle and faded away from sight. It was a grand city of north, a hive of industrial activity. Freight trains and wagons rolled in and out at all hours, carrying all manner of steam, this and electro-loop that, heading east and west along Russia's Great Back. Given the city's size, I could not believe that Trans-Siberian was the only connection, so I determined to find something else to offer my master as an alternative. I began to search at a nearby waterfront, but it turned out that despite a number of small lakes, there was little in the way of ferry transport. Next, I tried an open area to the southeast, which I reasoned might be an airfield, and it was but a military one. Can you give me one good reason why I should allow you to fly with us? What an impertinent line of questioning. We are going around the world, I declared. They were not sympathetic. I was marched out of the field at gunpoint. By now it was growing late, so I returned to Monsieur Fogg. My master had passed the hour, sipping a single cup of tea, which it was clear from the look on his face he had not enjoyed. So I have 2 days to figure out what I'm doing. So I will have to take a detour if I do that. I just don't see it that helping me that much. Before going to bed, I attend tea with intentions he would have a restorative night. Relations with Fogg have improved slightly. I still have to wait a day, so... We made ourselves comfortable for the night, and I spent a few hours walking around, but found nothing of any particular interest. I could go all the way there. That is a long trek, but we joined the Trans-Siberian Express in the Urals. Fog valet, dapper. Full report. I hope so too, man. I settled Monsieur Fogg and went to explore the train, ending up in a car filled with lively cavalry officers, eating smoked fish and playing music. One of them joined me to play his balalaika, a kind of triangular mandolin. I accepted eagerly and strummed a few notes to familiarize myself with an unaccustomed instrument. Once happy with its function, I played a familiar favorite, Yippee, a song about a musical fellow called Hermann von Bello, who was possessed of a rather sizable cello. Our choruses of yips and a's rather alarmed some of the fellow diners, and I was treated to some colorful local lyrical variations which cast a new light on Herr von Bello's prodigious talents. The officers were so pleased by my performance that they very generously made me a gift of that same balalaika. I cannot wait to play it for Monsieur Fogg. Where the trains takes on meditative quality. I visited the library car and met Golan, the daughter of a Mongol chieftain who was poring over a thick volume of algebra. I confessed myself surprised by her choice of reading, but she shrugged. I must study algebra if I am to be an engineer in the Imperial Army of Russia. I wish to leave behind my ancestors' warrior past. It is a new world, I observed. We may remake ourselves as we like. She laughed, delighted. Just so. She folded the book closed. You have traveled, monsieur? They call us barbarians, don't they? She asked. Who are they, and what do they matter? I demanded with the rhetoric spirit. Your life is yours. She leaned forward, eyes shining. The truth is, there is more going on in my country than most outsiders know. We are growing fast as a people. What do you mean? I asked, intrigued. This is the age of progress, she replied, tapping her books of systems and of thermodynamics, and my people, we have discovered some very interesting things. I was intrigued and leaned forward to hear more, but the girl shook her head. I won't tell you, she said and laughed. I will show you, tomorrow night on the deck. I will be there, I nodded. We conversed until supper, and she presented me with her family's sleuth, a Mongolian horsetail banner. I do not have any need of my past. Where am I going? She said. You have it. Do with it what you will. Polished. Today we decanted. A full score of British, Dutch, and German merchants, and took on more military officers who cleared an entire first-class carriage for the use of a mysterious couple. I caught a brief glimpse of the man before the carriage door slammed. He had pale brown skin and the eyes of a scholar, but was dressed in the fashion of the Ottoman court rather than the Russian Imperium. I was fairly overset with curiosity, but it would be several days before I encountered the couple again. The hour grew late, and my meeting with Golan, the mathematician, approached. Monsieur Fogg watched my bustling about our cabin with suspicion. You look as though you're planning an escape, he remarked. I think perhaps I will stretch my legs. Monsieur Fogg nodded and folded his newspaper. Then I will come with you. Sir, I am meeting a woman, I confessed. Monsieur Fogg lowered his paper. Is that so? He replied. And how, pray, do you explain such a thing? She knows about transport from Mongolia. He started to his feet. Then we shall go at once, he barked, my heart saying. Of course, I nodded my head, and we left the cabin together, headed for the viewing platform of the train where Golan was waiting. You came, she said. I am glad. With a glance at Monsieur Fogg, she added, Who is this? This is my master. He was curious to see whatever it was you wanted to show me. She looked at me in the eye for a moment, then looked away. Oh, of course, yes. Gesturing for us to follow, she led the way along the rail. After peering for a moment, she pointed way into the dark. There. I saw nothing, but Monsieur Fogg was nodding. That is no evening star, he said definitively. It is moving. Gullin nodded, stepping back. That star is the Garuda launching, she replied. It flies at night to keep it a secret, but now you know it. What is the Garuda? I asked. The world has been made small by airships, Golindup replied. They pull everyone closer together, but our Garuda is faster still. It will turn this world into a single teeming city, and Urgo will be at this new world's heart. That sounds excellent, does it not, Monsieur? I remarked. Monsieur Fogg nodded sharply in agreement. It suits our purpose very well indeed. I thanked her, and we turned to go. Golan muttered a curse in her own language. What purpose? We are traveling around the world, I told her. What for? She spat back. Her dark eyes flashed with hot anger. I should have known better than to talk to you, she replied. My mother warned me against handsome men. Her choice of words left me speechless. I said nothing, and she swept away. Monsieur Fogg coughed gently, and we turned to our cabin. Well, that could have gone better. I'm apparently not good at flirting even in imaginary world. Famous dancer scene. See for turn. The lines are thick here, and other trains pass ours frequently. Some are filled with settlers and others with soldiers, packed into 5th and 6th class cars so closely that I wonder if they can even breathe. Saw a darker train go past, metal cars with iron gratings that seemed to cast shadows as it moved. It was a prison train, bound for nowhere. The criminals aboard were simply carried backwards and forwards across the mountains, always moving, never stopping. I saw children's faces held up to the light. The prisoners are allowed to take their families with them. Whether that is mercy or a worse punishment for a good conscience, I cannot tell. I keep missing those. We crossed at the halfway mark of our journey today. In the morning, we wound up at the Angara Valley towards the mining camp of something, the great city of Siberia, where some passengers were leaving to join routes south into Mongolia. We waited while the luggage was unloaded by leisurely porters and rough-clad moujiks until the whistle blew and the train's engines wound up once more. Our journey continued, and by afternoon we had reached the magnificent expanse of Lake Baikal, as clear as the finest crystal, bounded by flower-banked cliffs on the western shore and containing a thriving raucous population of freshwater seals. The track ended at the lake's edge, but the great train showed no signs of slowing or stopping. I began to feel, as my master would say, a little perturbed. Now, my friends, this next sentence will seem to you the invention of a madman, but I assure you it is utter, unvarnished truth. We drove straight from the shore onto the clear water of the lake, causing barely a ripple. I looked out of the compartment window and saw the wheels pulled up, and Zitolors, the train was hovering in the air through some unseen mechanism. I looked for the tracks and could only just see them against the gleam of the lake. They were running built upon pontoons, which only just broke the surface of the water. Though we did not touch them, what sort of train was this Trans-Siberian? Feel a little better for your attentions. From the window I watched families working at their fields, dressed in colors bright as harlequins, red and blue bodices and bright bandanas, which they pulled off to wave at the train. People are wonderful. They live somewhere bleak, and they make themselves colorful instead. What do you know? That's just too many names. There's little to report of the outside world, so a word today on Russian eating habits, more specifically the Russian distaste for regular mealtimes. I met a fellow Frenchman today who said to me, "The Russian meal is a guide to the Russian character." I begged him to explain further, and he obliged me. The guiding principle of the national cuisine is that all dishes must be capable of being served at any time the eater feels disposed. He sacrifices his finer susceptibilities to his love of freedom. I resolved to keep this thought in mind on future approaches to the dining car. If our locomotive suppers are not triumphs of culinary art, they are at least signal examples of logistical achievement. We pulled into in the late morning from. It was possible to branch onto the Chinese Eastern Railway to Beijing, so we disembarked onto the platform. We watched the train pull away, and I knew I would miss the hot water, the leather seats, and the gentle rocking of the carriage. I think we complete our Russian costume here for protection against the cold. I walked the streets a while, discovering the possibilities for how we might make progress. It's too bad the market doesn't update every day. There was no moon, and not even a barking dog marred the silence of the luminous Siberian night. The only lit building bore the Capers Lily of the Artificers Guild. I knocked at the back door, eager to find company to help pass the long, cold night. A dwarf with long black hair, rouged lips, and thick brass goggles opened the door. I bowed and introduced myself as a foreigner, looking for a conversation. Welcome, coming out of the cold then. We walked through a squalid corridor into a round room lit with bright electrical lamps. The artificer sprawled on low sofas and greeted me with beery enthusiasm. A human form automaton ushered me to a seat and handed me a drink with mechanical precision. I took it cautiously. I accepted my drink with a grin. I accepted my drink with a grin, and the small gears in the automaton's face were to produce an answering smile. The hours passed quickly in good company, and we shared many outlandish tales. I complimented their hospitality, and they clapped me on the arm. It has been a pleasure sharing our fire with you. She reached in her pocket and took out a copper medallion with the Artificer's lily stamped upon it. Take this. Present it to any member of the Artificers Guild, and they will be bound to offer you help. I thanked them for their generosity and wended my way back through the dark streets of a city lit only by the brightness of stars and the pale ethereal glow of northern light.